お前はどこまで見えている。俺の死に様か。
Naruto, who lived in the village of Konoha, was heading home at night. Today he completed what was supposed to be an A-rank mission. After defeating Madara, he was called a hero and the title of a demon was forgotten. But finally, having reached the shabby building and going home, he discovered only devastation. Everything was turned upside down, dishes were broken, furniture was broken, the sofa and bed were gutted, and the photo of Kushina and Minato was smashed to pieces. Taking the photo out of the broken frame, Uzumaki removed it into his pocket and looked around angrily, wanting to find the culprit of such devastation. But only as he approached the window, the head of the Anbu appeared behind him. He was a tall and moderately inflated man. After Kakashi became Hokage, he seriously weeded out the Anbu and himself chose the leader of the masked men. In front of Uzumaki stood a man of about 30 with black hair and a tiger mask covering his entire face. "I'm sorry, but you pose a threat to the village and the people living in it," said the Anbu leader. To which Namikaze was taken aback, but clenching his fists painfully, he said, "Why? I saved the world from Madara and the Ten Tails, people accepted me as a hero." Approaching, the Anbu just sighed and, placing his hand on the katana, calmly hanging on his left side, said, as if reluctantly looking at the Jinchuriki, "I'm sorry, they accepted you not as a hero, but as a potential dangerous enemy who is 10 times stronger than them. They will not accept you as a hero and will never treat you well. I'm sorry you had to go through so much." Naruto's thoughts revolved around this event. Why me? I did so much for these rotten people, I gave them everything I had. Now I can definitely protect them. But, if they see me only as an enemy, then there is no point in staying here for me. I have no one to live for, try, or even just breathe, it's better to die. Namikaze's face looked sad, because he had long suspected this. He was all his life I felt these glances in the back, even from friends. With some sadness, the tall man, whose face was hidden by a mask, instantly took out a katana and pierced the Jinchuriki's heart, but he only smiled painfully, grabbed the katana, and with his other hand took off the leaf bandage and with a precise movement threw it into the trash. How naive I was. To hope that I would one day stop being demo. Blood gushed from Uzumaki's mouth, making it difficult to finish, and he closed his eyes and plunged into darkness until he heard the cry of a baby. It was him and people unfamiliar to Naruto were looking at him. He slightly closed his eyes from the bright light, looked from his face. They were a middle-aged man and woman. They smiled widely looking at the newborn. They were ordinary people, but at the same time happy. Suddenly the mother spoke. "Naruto, your name will be Naruto." Many years passed. As it turned out, Namikaze was reborn in another world. His name was Naruto Umaki. He had blonde hair and 3 stripes on his cheeks, just like in his previous life. Even Kurama was with him, although they were both surprised at this more than once. This world was more technologically advanced and there were no tailed, hidden villages, and not a single hint of this at all. Now the boy was 8 years old and he had traveled with his parents around the world more than once, visiting many countries, while restoring his chakra hearth. It was replenished very quickly, because the natural chakra around was concentrated, but due to the fact that no one knew how to use it. There was an extremely large amount of it, and the OC, chakra hearth, very quickly adapted to this world. This allowed Naruto to use techniques at greater scale and with little fear of exhaustion. He could only get tired because Umaki's small body could not withstand the load of more complex techniques than C rank. Naruto's parents, knowing that their son was capable and smart, left him in the forest. They had already been camping in nature for 3 days, leaving their 10-year-old son alone. They were sure that he was very smart and would not get lost. They weren't terrible parents. But they weren't overprotective either. It was the perfect middle ground. The Umaki were glad to be somewhere without their backbreaker, but they were also worried about him, asking about his well-being. Let's move on to the meeting with the demon. Naruto's parents left him alone again, at his own request. The boy, sitting in the lotus position, meditated, slowly expanding his OP, but his training did not last forever. something rustled in the nearby bushes, and a demon jumped out of there, wanting to feast on the boy's power, feeling how it was simply blowing from him. Baring its yellow fangs, the black creature was about to bite Umaki, when instead of the boy he grabbed a log. Growling, he looked around and noticed a blonde top of the head on a tree branch. "I didn't think there were demons here. Apparently, I'm not the only one here." Naruto quickly jumped behind the wolf-like demon and used one of his own techniques with kurama. Due to the fact that the chakra was many times more concentrated than the mana used by local creatures, the chakra was spent in smaller quantities, and the seal restraining the Kyuubi disappeared altogether. The only thing that held him back from using the Ninetales chakra was the colossal load on the body, which could turn the inside's guy into a bloody mess. The former Uzumaki, releasing concentrated chakra around himself in the form of a thick aura, added a little Kurama's chakra, which is why it acquired a barely visible, yellow glow. This aura was so oppressive in its concentration that the demon who came under its influence experienced some fear of the boy, while at the same time writhing from lack of air. A minute later, the fugitive demon lost consciousness and the boy, with relief, deactivated his technique, because even such a small amount of the Ninetales chakra had already forced his body to work hard, causing profuse sweating. Approaching the unconscious huge dog, the fair-haired man, without even blinking an eye, killed him, not dirtying his clothes at all, but only his hand. The large number of battles passed took its toll on Naruto's character, which is why he killed living beings, without even blinking an eye. Having with difficulty dragged away the corpse of the half-wolf, Umaki noticed that there was unknown energy in it, after which the boy absorbed it, while communicating in the subconscious with Kurama. "This hasn't happened before, what is this coup?" The huge fox, after thinking, answered with a wide smile. "I think this is a gift given to you during rebirth. I can't say for sure, but it hasn't awakened yet. I will be waiting with you for the unpacking of the surprise." Naruto chuckled and felt a slight surge of strength after completely absorbing the energy, but just shrugging his shoulders, the 10-year-old boy went back to camp, after wiping the blood from his hand. Namikaze had already completed his studies in primary and secondary school. Now his parents were thinking about transferring to Kuo Academy, because the nickname and attitude towards their son did not particularly suit Umaki, which is why they, having considered all the pros and cons, sent him there. Fortunately his studies were excellent and it was impossible to call him a typical excellent student. The word that best suited his description was indigo. Naruto, upon learning about his transfer, was indignant, because why did he need to transfer when he had friends at that academy, just friends, because he was not friends with the opposite sex, and he was not particularly friends with his own, but still there were some people who endured. Why did they endure? Because Umaki was a little hot-tempered and impulsive, loving to fight and tease. Although the opposite sex noticed his excellent physical fitness and sculpted body, for his age, which is why there were also fans. Uzumaki both attracted and repelled people, which is why he was called choleric, ram and impulsive. But the parents only said that their son, surrounded by women, would be able to somehow tame his ardor as a hero, becoming more balanced and calm. Kurama also reacted to this, forcing Uzumaki to train twice as much, because there were 2 months before entering the academy. All these trainings, Kyuubi forced Naruto to perform double the norm of physical training, increase the available volume of the Ninetales chakra and the volume of PP. By the end of the training, he had ideal physical preparation, and maybe even and more. A beautiful body, and the ability to use 15% of Kurama's chakra. If Naruto exceeds this threshold, he will immediately damage his organs. What would you understand, the aura from chakra, PS? This is the technique with which Naruto defeated the first demon, for exactly 10 minutes, without a break, borrows 1%, and the bija cover is 47%. 1 chakra tail, 20%. Day of admission to the academy. It was only recently that they announced the transition to coeducational education, which is why some did not have time to switch to it at all, so there were many times fewer males here than females. Entering the school grounds, Naruto straightened his suit and headed into the building, only he got lost trying to find the right office. He stood in a stupor for several minutes, but Uzumaki also did not want to ask for help from someone, because of his stubbornness, until a girl with short black hair, violet eyes, and red-framed glasses did not approach him. As I understand, you are new? Since I am the head of the student council, I must help you and lead you to your class. Naruto, having greeted and thanked the girl, told her the number of his class and the audience, to which she only nodded, taking him to her class. As it turned out, they were classmates and Sona, that was the student's name, had been here from the very beginning, which is why she knew the entire academy inside and out. In fact, Citri would not have paid attention to this boy if he had not given off a strange and concentrated aura, which is why she assumed that this boy had an artifact sealed in him that would become useful in the future. Entering the classroom, Naruto introduced himself and talked a little about himself, while the two girls fought with their eyes. These persons were the already famous Sona and Rias Gremory, also known as the first beauty of the school. Only they fought for a reason, both, due to the fact that they were demon kings, needed servants, and the aura wafting from the newcomer attracted them, promising a surprise in the form of an artifact. But no one won the fight, since the lesson began. Namikaze studied quite normally, as before, only now he had more fans of the opposite sex, to whom he did not pay much attention, since he was not used to communicating with people, either in the past or in this life. Over the course of a year, Naruto activated his sacred mechanism, which was capable of absorbing mana and chakra from all living organisms, in the first and second cases without killing them, but only depleting them, but this could be controlled. Thanks to the absorption of other people's powers, Naruto strengthened his own and also improved his characteristics. Rias and Sona did not openly communicate with him, because they both had suspicions about his race, which is why they watched him, trying to make sure of his innocence. Kurama, noticing them, told the blonde, thanks to which he successfully hid from persecution. Day after day, Naruto trained in using the artifact, increasing control over it, which could not help but attract the fallen, who wanted to take another artifact with him, receiving an additional reward. The artifact acquired by the fallen turned out to be the holy mechanism of the dragon, or to be more precise, the tail. Naruto, not wanting to die, forced the enemy to become numb, and then killed him with a Rasengan crossed with a Chidori. Uzumaki understood that there was no need to hesitate, so he immediately used his signature technique, which took a third of his accumulated mana. The fallen man, who did not expect such a turn of events, came under attack, but dying, he slashed his holy spear across Umaki's chest, smoothly moving to his jaw and almost reaching his cheekbone. The cut wasn't particularly deep, but it was bleeding. Fortunately his parents joked, "We'll put you up separately, here are the keys to the apartment. We won't interfere with you setting up your personal life, we bought him an apartment." Because of which there will be no unnecessary questions. The fallen one died and Naruto, feeling an unknown force emanating from the fallen one, immediately wanted to absorb it, completely ignoring Kurama's warnings. Having absorbed it completely, Umaki felt a sharp surge of strength, which made his head spin and he fell on his butt and grabbed it. The wound healed quickly, but left a bulky scar, and the artifact began to transform, but the migraine with dizziness did not go away anywhere. Getting up from the ground, Uzumaki trudged home, trying not to fall. Although this could have happened several times, Kurama wanted to yell at his friend, but noticing his condition, he remained silent, because this could only make things worse. Naruto barely reached the apartment, just closed the door, when he immediately fell to the floor, unconscious. There was darkness all around, as it sounded. No, it was more like a howl from someone's head out of the darkness. "What did you do?" Naruto, not understanding what was happening, walked into the darkness, towards the voice. Kurama did not respond, which is why Umaki was here alone with the creature from the darkness. After a few minutes of walking, an orange-colored dragon appeared in front of the fair-haired one, which was glowing. The Kyubi chakra and mana of the artifact swirled around it. After a few minutes, the dragon died down and Kurama's slightly altered voice sounded. "Did we just absorb it? I feel changes both in myself and in you." As if, Kurama tried to find words, to which Naruto only continued. "We became close to this world." The Ninetales just nodded and they began to think about what had happened. As they understood, Kurama took into himself the power of that dragon, thanks to Naruto's artifact, which is why he could be considered a creature similar to Drayeg, only he could communicate with him in the subconscious. After the changes, the holy mechanisms will unite into one, or rather in kurama. He now resembled a nine-tailed fox dragon. Weird name equals, huh? When activated, the mechanism manifested itself as the use of kurama's chakra. The hair became sharper, the pupil became dragon-like, the nails grew into claws, the fangs became sharper, and the stripes on the cheeks became fatter and more clearly visible. Only this mode differed from the use of kurama's chakra, in that when using the holy mechanism from Naruto, only bloodlust and hatred were felt, which he could control, and when using kurama's chakra, translucent, reddish-yellow chakra was visible around. I lay around with a headache and a restructuring of the Uzumaki body for about a week, having warned everyone before that. Finally arriving at the academy after a week's absence, many noticed the scar that had appeared and began to ask about it, to which Naruto simply waved it off. Only 3 people from his class noticed not only external changes, but also internal ones. Rias, Akino, and Sona noticed changes in his aura, the latter, thinking that he had become one of the warring factions, angels, demons, fallen, simply shrugged and abandoned the idea of recruiting him. But the first, red-haired princess of destruction, due to the lack of servants, only became more interested in him. Everything went the same way, only Omaki had 1 less observer and twice as much training. One day, Kiba Yuto approached Naruto. Uzumaki immediately realized that he was an unusual person, because he had an unusual aura, but without showing it, he just said hello. Hello, do I owe something? Namikaze asked, examining the guy standing in front of him. To which he smiled and said, hello to you too, I am Yuto Kiba, a member of the Occult Research Club. I would like to invite you there, Umaki Naruto. After thinking for a moment, Umaki replied, I'll come, is it okay after school? Kiba just nodded, but the next words surprised him. Just tell Gremory that I know about surveillance. The blonde guy's voice sounded with fake reluctance, but even so it was difficult to distinguish. Yuto just nodded uncertainly and left the classroom with a puzzled look on his face. Why did Naruto realize that it was Rias and Akino? These 2 were not at school and only an ordinary person could not notice the almost daily surveillance of themselves. The lessons ended and Umaki slowly got up from his desk and headed towards the old school building, where the Occult Research Club was located. Leaving the school, Naruto walked along a small path that was hardly lit, but since it was not very dark now, one could see in the distance the outlines of an old and seemingly unsafe building. Having reached the old building, the guy walked in there quite calmly, completely oblivious to his condition. Everything looked much better inside than outside. It was clear that the inside of the building was periodically cleaned and at least small repairs were made. Having reached the desired door, Umaki first knocked and then opened it, revealing a small-looking room with 2 sofas and a small table between them. Then there was a large table with an armchair. The sofas were upholstered in dark green fabric. You can see the wooden inserts. Like everything made of wood, it was made of dark oak, and in the middle of the room there was a large burgundy carpet. Inside, everything looked cozy, only if all the eyes of the club members were not fixed on him, carefully examining the guest. Namely, there they sat, his classmate Akino, his recently acquired new acquaintance Kiba, but Naruto called him by his last name Yuto, first-year Kaneko, and at a large table sat a red-haired demon, Rias Gremory, carefully studying the long-awaited guest. Looking at everyone with a look, Alya, what's wrong with me? Entered the room, everyone immediately looked away, except for Gremory, but she didn't have to wait long and she spoke. How did you find out about the surveillance? Naruto, without thinking twice, stood against the wall and crossed his arms and answered. 7th sense. Why do you need me? Uzumaki already knew the answer to this question, but he wanted to hear an answer from Rias. Yes, he also knew that they were demons, and just about 3 factions, since with the power of the dragon, Kurama also passed on memory, which he kindly told to my friend. But before Gremory began to speak, Umaki warned her. Please don't lie to me, since I already know about the 3 factions, and that you are demons. There was misunderstanding in the eyes of those present. Only Gremory was able to partially hide it, but after thinking for a few minutes, the king said. Although I have a lot of questions, it's all over time. I would like you to join the occult research club and also become my figure of evil. Naruto thought for a moment and said, "No." Rias hoped that he would agree, because with this team she could not avoid marrying the scumbag Razor, which is why she looked at Naruto again with some sadness and request. But why? Umaki was silent for a few seconds, which seemed to last an eternity, and said, "It wasn't in my plans to become a demon, because while I have the opportunity, I want to feel like a human again." Most did not attach importance to his last words, but not Rias and Akino. They noticed the secret of this blonde boy. The mood and attitude stomped and there was an oppressive silence, after which Naruto said, "Since this conversation is over, I'll go." Namikaze noticed the atmosphere reigning in the room and the depressed mood of the red-haired woman, but she stood up forcefully and smiled. "I'll accompany you." The Uzumaki just nodded. He and the president left the room and reached the front door. Rias's quiet voice sounded, with the only and perhaps last hope in her voice. "Maybe." Naruto interrupted Gremory a little abruptly, walking away from her, but at the last words he turned around and smiled. "My decision cannot be changed. Only if you find me dead, you can try. I won't mind living another life with beautiful girls next to me." The scarlet-haired girl only nodded weakly and looked at Uzumaki's back, hoping that she would have such a chance, but now she could not hesitate and she moved on to the second option, Hyudu Issei. Let's move on to Issei and Rainal's date. Naruto was also there, walking and enjoying nature. He rarely visited such places, because he considered it more productive to train or study. But today he wanted to take a walk, as if fate itself was drawing the Jinchuriki there. Everything happened according to the scenario. The fallen woman and Issei walked through the park until she asked, "Are you ready to die for me?" And again, as fate would have it, Umaki was nearby, feeling an unpleasant aura and thirst for blood. The fair-haired one rushed there and noticed how the black-haired girl wanted to pierce the boy with a spear already familiar to Naruto, to which he replaced the member from the trio of perverts with a log and instead of Hyudo, Rainal pierced the piece of wood. "Which one?" the girl said, and looking around, noticed an uninvited guest. To which she smiled bloodily and said, "Oh, so the second target is here too. Two birds with one stone. Although you are many times more interesting than this virgin." After which, spreading her wings, she quickly moved towards Naruto, launching an attack with her holy weapon. Kaneko, who was watching all this, did not dare to step in, because Rias ordered her to keep an eye on Naruto and not show up, but only quickly deliver the news to her, even if he was dying, no matter how cruel it looked and sounded. Naruto had already received countless wounds from the holy weapons that covered his body numerously and bled heavily, but not paying attention to them, the fair-haired one created a clone that disabled Issei and carried him away. Realizing that he was losing, the Uzumaki decided to do a bad thing. From the very beginning, he sensed the holy mechanism in Issei, because of which the hunt for him began. Naruto used his one-time ability, which helped him completely drain the magical artifact, leaving the creature alive and absorbing its power, abilities, and the like. Having absorbed Drag, Uzumaki again felt a huge surge of strength, due to which a small kurama mode was activated in him, barely visible. Yellow chakra began to appear around him, fangs grew, the pupil became vertical, nails turned into weak claws, and fox stripes became more visible. With this cover, Naruto rushed towards the fallen woman, tearing her wings with his techniques. The pain and pulsating blood in his temples drowned out Kurama's words about the risk of death. He heard him perfectly well, but he could not do anything, because this was his only chance to survive in the fight against a stronger opponent. Kaneko was already running to Gremory, warning her about the risk, and Naruto was fighting without paying attention. His chakra reserves were leaving his body, and his last technique was out of control. Rasengan. Using this technique in one hand, Namikaze had already hit the enemy, when suddenly the technique exploded, causing double damage to the enemy and the Jinchuriki himself. The fallen one died, and Naruto, spitting out a large clot of blood, fell to the ground. The cover dissipated, as did the remnants of chakra leaving his body. Suddenly, Naruto's gaze fell on a piece of paper lying nearby with a red pentagram, to which he, taking it with a bloody hand, spoke in a tired and dying voice. Even here, I will be haunted by the essence of a demon. Gremory. Red hair like my mother, Kushina. Dull, sky-blue eyes looked at the sky and heavy eyelids closed, feeling a small surge of mana nearby. During the fight, Kaneko ran as fast as she could to Rias, and almost burst into the room and reported what was happening. Now Gremory was confused. Her only chance was dying. She couldn't teleport now, because if the fallen one escaped, there would definitely be a conflict, which would violate the peace treaty between Satan and Azazel. And running after his death is too long, because then the soul will already leave the body and it will be pointless. Tension grew, and the decision was made to move forward, but not to intervene. Now everything depended only on the decision of fate that brought Naruto there. Feeling a small surge of an unknown aura, the scarlet-haired one immediately recognized the fox cub, which is why she hurried even faster, because this aura began to fade. They wouldn't have made it in time without Uzumaki taking the sheet with the pentagram. The Princess of Perdition was glad that fate and luck were on their side, after which she immediately activated the seal and found herself next to Naruto's body. Akino and Kaneko, who were present nearby, were horrified by the wounds on the boy's body, because it could be called a mess. But Rias did not wait long and, sending her charges to look for Issei, ordered them to erase his memory, because she was sure that there were not enough pieces for him, and even without Drake's power he would be useless. Squatting on her knees, Rias placed all 8 pawns on Naruto, but he did not accept them. Lost in thought, Gremory took out a bishop, placing it on Naruto. He absorbed everything into himself, but still without opening his eyes, only a faint the heartbeat proved that he was alive. The king smiled because Naruto turned out to be stronger than Issei, and she made the right choice, that she chose the little fox. Morning. Naruto's house. The whole body ached and Naruto and Kurama felt changes in themselves. The Uzumaki, feeling a gaze on him and someone lying next to him, spoke without opening his eyes. You reborn me as a demon, but you had to climb into my bed? Opening his sky-blue eyes and looking at the girl lying next to him, a silent question was read in Umaki's gaze. Rias, who had been lying next to her all this time and carefully examining every millimeter of the face of the sleeping Namikaze, shuddered at the unexpected voice, and then, covered with a blush, looked reproachfully at Umaki, as if he had done something wrong. But he didn't have to wait long, and Naruto, having examined the girl and her naked body, sat down on the bed, continued the previously asked question. Despite the fact that you are naked. Gremory snorted a little cutely, got out of bed and put on the guy's t-shirt without permission, and said. Actually, I saved your life, and you're so grateful. Faintly offended, Uzumaki got out of bed and, putting on the already prepared t-shirt and shorts, stretched. It's like you're in high school, but you're acting like a child. Okay, I'll go make breakfast, will you? If anything, the shower is on the right along the corridor. Just in case, Namikaze left the room, leaving the red-haired girl with herself, to which she, after standing for a while, blushed slightly. What's wrong with me? This hasn't happened to me before, and I wasn't embarrassed over trifles. I'd better go to the shower and freshen up. Naruto, realizing that the girl would most likely go to wash, put 2 towels in a visible place and shower gel. Then he went to the kitchen and took out 4 eggs and the same number of slices of bacon and fried them. Laying everything out on the plate, Umaki chopped up some vegetables, placing them on the plate as well. Putting the kettle on to boil, Naruto sat down at the table, and just at that time Gremory appeared. Sit down, everything is ready. Fortunately today our lessons start later. The red-haired girl only nodded in agreement and sat down at the table and began to eat. Uzumaki, after chewing, asked. By the way, what kind of figure am I? And do you have anything to replace it? I understand that it's comfortable to walk here in my t-shirt, but then, many people won't understand. Smiling, Umaki continued to eat, occasionally glancing at the blushing Gremory, who calmed down and chewed a piece of bacon and said. In fact, you are a pawn. And since I am your king, I can not only take your t-shirt, as if hinting. Rias wanted to see a strong reaction from the guy, but she only received challenging words from the rather smiling blonde-haired you try. These two would continue to glare at each other, Namikaze, pleased and defiant, and the red-haired one a little indignant and proving something. Until this idyll was disrupted by Little Fox's question. How to understand actually? Rias thought for a moment and looked at Namikaze, saying. Your body did not accept all 8 pawns, so I put 1 bishop, and only then did you become my servant. This is the 3rd time in all of that someone has become a mixed figure. Because of this, Satan himself conducts an exam where he evaluates the strength of the figure and gives it a name. He can become an ordinary pawn, bishop, even the 2nd queen. Well, or something else. Naruto, having thought over all the words said by the girl, got up from the table and poured both a mug of tea and asked. When will this assessment take place? Gremory thanked the guy for the mug of tea and answered without hesitation. When the king reports about this, or when Satan himself wants to trick him. Well, for now you will be Iblis. After all, that's what they call the figures of evil that have mutated. The rest of the time, this couple ate in silence. After finishing, Naruto collected all the dishes and began to wash them, telling the red-haired one to find her clothes and dress normally, and not show off in his t-shirt, to which Princess Ada just snorted and said that it was hers now. T-shirt, went to change clothes. They walked to school together, since it was not far away. Many looked with envy at this couple, girls and men. Some with admiration, but even such a look cannot interrupt the idyll reigning between them, calmly talking students of the academy. Approaching the educational institution, Umaki felt the attentive and even cursing gazes of males, and Rias felt the same, only from females. Some thought that they were dating, because it is unlikely that you can communicate so well and not pay attention to anyone, just meeting on the street. But this couple again didn't care, they just talked calmly as they walked to their class. Many of their classmates were surprised that these two were talking, because before they didn't really communicate, they didn't even look at each other. Akino, noticing this situation, went up to say hello to her president, only then she whispered to ear she does not say greetings at all. Has the president really fallen in love? I've never seen you so engrossed in a conversation. Gremory wanted to greet Himejima, but her question made her blush, to which the black-haired girl only smiled. RR. President, your face is like your hair, you better calm down, otherwise unnecessary questions will come up. Rias was about to answer something, but then she was interrupted by the little fox, who was the topic of conversation. Umaki was watching the girls all this time and the way they both looked at him, and the princess blushed, turned away, smiling. Naruto decided to annoy Rias and approached quietly and said. Only then return my t-shirt. And then you spent the whole morning in it, and also took it for yourself. Uzumaki smiled slyly and galloped off to his place, and Gremory, reddish with embarrassment, clenched her fists to the quiet laughter of the queen. Naruto. This voice did not bode well, as did the girl's look, but everyone quickly calmed down when the bell rang for class. Everyone studied calmly, except for Uzumaki, who, smiling, communicated with the fox in his subconscious. It's good that you embarrassed her so much, and also angered her. I feel revenge will soon come to you. Haha. You hang in there somehow, she definitely won't miss her chance, the fox said laughing, looking at Namikaze's happy face. You know, I still have to serve her, we'll have time to beat each other's brains out, the Jinchuriki shrugged, to which Kyubi also shrugged. And that's true. By the way, it's time for you, otherwise you'll miss the break. Then we'll talk some more. By the way, a red-haired beast is coming towards you. Naruto, coming out of his subconscious, chuckled, and said goodbye to Kurama. Yeah, if I survive. Having woken up, Umaki met the stubborn gaze of the red-haired beauty, to which she folded her hands under her chest and said. I finally woke up. After school, you must come to the club. I'll introduce you to the others. Naruto smiled slightly, nodded and directed his gaze to the board, again plunging into his subconscious for the remaining time. The lessons were successful. Uzumaki, leaving the class, only now noticed that the strawberry had left for class earlier, but he just shrugged his shoulders and moved towards the old building. Walking along the same road, Umaki opened the door and again felt searching eyes on him, until Gremory cleared her throat, while the others turned their gaze to her. "Sit down. You are now part of the Gremory family. It's time to introduce you." Namikaze nodded and sat down on the sofa next to Kaneko, the same one, even after Rias's cough, continued to glare and at the same time study the little fox with her gaze, which was caught on the stripes on her cheeks. But no one waited, and the king said, "You are already familiar with Yudo Kiba and Akino, and the girl sitting next to you, Kaneko Tojo." As if asking the girl a question, she only answered, continuing to look at Umaki. "I am an Akosho, or rather an Akomata." Some were surprised that she immediately decided to tell the newcomer everything, but in response to these questioning glances, Kaneko only timidly asked, as if pointing to her mustache, "And you? Are you also a Nekamat? You give off the aura of a strong and ancient fox." Kurama's bass voice suddenly sounded in his fair-haired head. "But the girl is not stupid, remember how we rehearsed?" "I agree, they still don't have any evil intentions, they are your allies, but still you don't need to show all your trump cards." Naruto nodded without saying anything and returned to the real world, where he only shook his head in denial and lifted his t-shirt slightly, showing everyone a black tattoo in the form of symbols, but in fact it turned out to be a seal that the fox only hid, but did not hold back. Flashback. "Naruto, I know one technique that will allow you to temporarily release me, but due to the large surge of chakra, it will be difficult for you to control for now, which is why I will draw too much of your chakra. Are you ready?" Before the fox could finish, Uzumaki's eyes lit up and he jumped to his feet in his subconscious and began to look attentively, even too carefully, at his old friend. "How?" Only the excited voice of Namikaze sounded, to which Kyubi only smiled broadly and began to explain how to use this technique. The next week, Umaki went out into nature, away from the city, and taking his t-shirt, he revealed to the world his pumped-up abs and his former sealing seal, now just a tattoo. Placing his palm on it and passing chakra to certain points, Naruto felt dizzy due to the fact that this technique ate up half of his existing chakra. But in return, the great Kyubi Noyaku appeared before him, which was now knee-high, with 9 fluffy tails visible behind his back. "You can control my size, but even so, it requires half of your available chakra, sucks." Uzumaki nodded in agreement and began to train his OC for quantity. End flashback. Now Naruto, having performed the same technique, poured chakra into his fingers and twisted his palm. An unknown force was felt, thick and sticky. Even primal fear could be read in the eyes of those present. As soon as Tojo carefully peered into the thick yellow glow, a red-haired kurama with 9 tails appeared on Umaki's feet, only he was not modified as in the subconscious, but old, only the aura had changed. Kurama looked at himself and said, "Wow, I didn't think that my old appearance would remain. Why is everyone staring at me like that?" The fox looked back and saw very attentive glances from the club members, to which he looked at his Jinchuriki, who was smiling guiltily. "This is my inner demon and best friend. Kyubi no Yoku." Everyone continued to study the 9 tails, especially the white-haired girl sitting next to him, who unexpectedly took him and hugged him, to which Kurama yelled, "Let me go, mortal. I will burn you all to the ground." Arg. The fox struggled, but Kaneko's titanium grip prevented him from doing so, causing Kurama to hang helplessly, like a plush toy. "Cute and soft," Tojo just said before letting go of the great Kyubi. "Now I have fewer questions," Rias said thoughtfully, watching the red fox and looking at Uzumaki's mustache. Kyubi quickly jumped away from the white-haired one, unpleasantly jumped on the fair-haired guy, as if blaming him for his torture, and then jumped onto the president's desk, not paying attention to the surprised look of the owner of this table, saying, "If you try, Strawberry, you won't get away with just a scar." Gremory, taken aback by such impudence, did not interfere with Kurama, and he calmly lay down on her legs. All those present and the owner of red hair looked questioningly at the owner of this beast, to which he guiltily scratched the back of his head and said, "He is wayward and I am not his master, but rather his roommate." Who is wayward here? It was you who actually gave this nickname to Gremory. Traitor. Naruto looked indignantly at the contentedly smiling fox and returned him back to his subconscious, to the comic cries of the fox. No. I just felt the fresh air. Gremory, blushing at such a statement, looked at Amaki, say, strawberry? Quite bye-bye. Explain to me. She was about to ask a question when Namikaze interrupted her, saying. So why are we gathered here? Why delay even more? It was heard that Naruto was trying to change the topic, but with a shrug they turned their attention to the topic of the meeting, with the strawberry situation. Gremory cleared her throat and told those present about Naruto and his figure. Many asked questions, which they answered together, but kurama is the only one of the many secrets that Umaki revealed. Naruto woke up in his bed, taking a t-shirt and shorts. Umaki went to the shower. Today was a day off and Namikaze went into the bathroom and quickly swam under cold water, when suddenly the doorbell rang, quickly throwing on his clothes and a small towel over his hair. Uzumaki opened the door and Gremory stood in front of him, smiling. The fair-haired one invited the girl inside, to which she thanked her and carefully followed the little fox, whose blonde hair was dripping water onto a snow-white t-shirt, and loose dark green knee-length shorts only decorated his image. It was impossible to notice the stone on the rope hanging around the neck. The color was something between green and blue. Rias, slightly blushing from this view of the guy, sat down at the kitchen table. The guy didn't have to wait long and he dried his hair, put the kettle on and sat down opposite Gremory. His hair was still wet, but there was no water in it. The silence did not last long, because she was interrupted by a blonde young man, carefully studying the red-haired girl, who was not in a school uniform. Why did you come at such an early hour, and on a day off? The girl's face immediately became sad and Umaki, realizing that the conversation would be long, handed the president a mug of tea and sat down opposite, ready to listen to the girl. Rias, realizing that the guy was ready, exhaled and collected her thoughts and began a conversation. As you already know, there are pure-blooded demons in, and after the war of 3 factions, their number has decreased, which is why pure blood is now very expensive. Since I am the heiress of the Gremory family, they want to marry me for convenience. For the continuation of pure blood and for stronger political ties. Namikaze, having considered the girl's words, continued for her. And you don't want to marry him, so you need help? Rias nodded in agreement. It was clear from her face that now she needed support and it was unpleasant to talk about this situation, but Naruto looked carefully and thoughtfully at the scarlet-haired princess, but then she continued. His name is Riser Phoenix, he's such a bastard. I just have no choice. I have already tried several times to convince my brother and father, but they just don't want to hear me. The girl's eyes drooped. It was already clear that she would soon give up. Naruto lightly hit the table and looked decisively at the girl. I can't watch when someone suffers. We will challenge him to a rating game and win your freedom. Having wiped a tear from the girl's face, Umaki smiled widely, thereby encouraging the girl, to which she took a sip of tea with a weak smile, but the unexpected question put her in a stupor. But why me? Why did you tell all this to me? Naruto asked as he carefully examined Rias. I don't know. I just wanted to trust you. Gremory said this with a thoughtful face and took a sip of tea and exhaled. After taking a sip of tea, the girl said. After I told this, it became at least a little easier. Naruto did not share this ease and sat with a thoughtful look. Riser Phoenix, the heir of his clan, also has a full chessboard. We will need training to have any chance. Uzumaki took a sip of tea, looked at the girl and stood up from the table with a smile, putting his cup on the sink. From your story, I realized that your wedding will only take place in a month. We have time, we need to call everyone and train until exhaustion in order to save you. Umaki continued to smile, but seeing the sad smile of the red-haired girl, he only smiled wider, saying, You don't have to worry, we will protect and help you to the end. Since you told me this, I will definitely keep my promise. The rest of the time Naruto and Rias just talked, sipped tea and sometimes laughed. The day went off with a bang, although it started off on the wrong foot so to speak. On Sunday, Naruto stood up from the sofa, stretching. Umaki looked around. The first question was, how did I end up here? And the second was the realization of what was happening. Yesterday they started talking and it was already dark. Even though Gremory was a demon, Uzumaki did not let her go, leaving her to spend the night at his place. Having cleared his room for her, Namikaze lay down on the sofa, so that's why. I'd better go take a swim, the guy thought to himself and was already about to take a change of clothes, when he remembered that the red-haired girl likes to sleep without clothes, and he doesn't disturb her over trifles. He stood and went into the bathroom, did not forget to close the door, after which he quickly took a cold shower and wiped his hair almost dry. Walking into the kitchen, Naruto prepared breakfast and, placing 2 plates on the table, put the kettle on to boil. At this time, when Umaki had just started cooking, Princess Gremory woke up and, realizing that she was not in her bed, began to look around, but remembering the familiar room, she exhaled. Rias, following the example of Uzumaki, headed to the shower and quickly bathed, changed into her clothes. By this time everything was ready, and when she went out to the kitchen, she heard a comment from the owner of the apartment. "Aren't you wearing my t-shirt?" "I'm pleasantly surprised." Slightly puffing out her cheeks, the red-haired woman crossed her arms under her chest, only emphasizing their size, and said, "If I wanted to, I would take all the t-shirts." Having laughed a little, the classmates sat down at the table and began to have breakfast. They were silent the whole time, which is why they all ate quickly, getting up from the table and taking the dishes. The little fox began to wash them, while asking, "Have you written to everyone about the gathering?" Gremory looked at the time, thought a little, and replied, "Yes, but are you sure what you need to tell them? These are empty experiences." Umaki finished the dishes, put them out to dry, and turning to the girl, firmly answered, "I'm sure. They are part of your family, are these not your words? Even so, it's better than saying it later, so they can prepare physically and mentally, and they will have time to help you." Gremory nodded weakly and looked at the wall clock and said, "By the way, it's time for us to leave so we can arrive on time." Uzumaki just nodded, went into his room and put on a black t-shirt, put on an orange sweater on top, and jeans on the bottom. Leaving the room, Namikaze nodded to Gremory that he was ready, and both put on their shoes and left the apartment. They were silent the whole way until Rias asked a question. "How are we going to solve this problem? We don't have much time to catch up with Riser, because we're already outnumbered." Naruto, after thinking for a while, smiled and showed his thumb, like Might Guy, and said, "Train, train and train again. A good fighter, a lot of gold, but a chicken with a weapon isn't worth a penny." After laughing, the guys had already calmed down, when suddenly the red-haired princess said, "We can expect everything from you like a little fox, it's not in vain that I chose you. At least it's fun with you." Umaki didn't pay attention to the other words, but little fox? Little fox? I? Gremory just smiled sweetly, closed her eyes, and slightly stuck her already large breasts forward and said, "And this is your revenge for the strawberry, you won't give stupid nicknames. Namely, a little fox, due to the fact that you have 3 whiskers, like cats and foxes, despite the fact that a fox also lives inside you." The rest of the time, classmates talked, trying to find at least some positive aspects during this difficult period. Having reached the occult research building, Rias and Naruto walked in a little hesitantly. The only thing missing inside was Akino, but she was as easy as, she arrived a few minutes later than her classmates. Once everyone was seated, Gremory began talking about her upcoming marriage and the small chance of liberation. Kaneko and Kiba sympathized with their president in such a fate and were eager to help her, but Akino had fake emotions and Naruto, noticing this, interrupted the red-haired woman, for which he apologized, but still asked the queen a question. "Your reaction is too calm, you knew about it, right?" Akino just smiled, looked at Umaki and, placing her hand on her cheek, said, "Yar, yar, what a quick-witted fox cub." Naruto was quite indignant, and almost pointing his finger at his friends, he loudly declared, "Have you agreed?" "Why, little fox?" The atmosphere in the room immediately brightened, everyone present immediately had a smile on their faces, some kind, some masochistic. Akino, only Uzumaki did not smile, looking stubbornly at his childhood friends. Yar, does the little fox really want to be a faithful dog? I can arrange this. Licking his lips strangely, one image immediately surfaced in Naruto's memory, and an unexpected statement came out of his mouth, because looking into the eyes of the second beauty of the school, they were begging to describe this beast. Don't come near me, you, and Snake. Standing next to the red-haired one, Umaki thereby hid from the demoness behind the red-haired one and went almost to the opposite corner of the room. Rias laughed quietly at such a scene, the always emotionless Kaneko smiled sincerely, and Yuto giggled a couple of times and continued to smile widely. But this idyll was broken by the serious voice of the president, after which everyone calmed down. Okay, we laughed and that's enough, now we need to come up with a training plan so as not to be sloppy. Everyone was thinking hard about each other's training, only Naruto had experience in creating a schedule, but they couldn't do it without support in the form of a fox. Shaggy suggested a separate, personal training session for everyone, and Umaki wrote it all down. While Rias and her figures were talking, Uzumaki filled out the entire sheet with the schedule. Coughing slightly, he drew attention to himself and handed the sheet of paper to Gremory, waiting for her to voice it. But the expression on the red-haired girl's face was more eloquent than a few words. The king's face expressed surprise, question, misunderstanding, and even doom. But the voice sounded with a genuine question. Will we even survive? The next day, the Occult Research Club finished school and went with their entire club on the so-called trip, but thanks to Gremory's abilities, the director let them go for a week plus, because none of the people are able to resist her hypnosis. All of Rias's figures were sitting in the clubroom, waiting for the right time. After a minute of such dead silence, the voice of the girl who was sitting at the head of the room with a gloomy face sounded. Now we will have to train as hard as we can to defeat Riser's pieces. Naruto, inspired, clenched his hand into a fist and exhaled noisily, which attracted attention to himself. I know where we can start training. This place is in the forest, next to my old house. My parents are now away for 2 months, so everyone can stay with me. Gremory lightly knocked on the table, stood up and examined her figures, and said. Then it's decided, for the rest of the time we will live with Naruto. Training, and then we will think about further actions. Umaki would like to object, but he rejected this idea, because he himself offered to move in with him, so he simply resigned himself. The next day, Uzumaki was already helping Akino and Rias carry things. There weren't enough rooms, and that's the only reason Namikaze decided to put Gremory in his room, and he went to sleep on the sofa. The parents' room definitely didn't count, because if something happened, they would immediately understand it, since such order always reigned in Umaki's room. God forbid a speck of dust ends up in the wrong place, they will understand everything. Having put Gremory's things on the bed, Uzumaki was about to leave when the red-haired hand stopped him. If you want, you can sleep with me, I don't mind. After all, it's not decent for the owner of the house to sleep on the sofa. There was no lie in the king's voice, to which Naruto, remembering how Gremory loves to sleep, covered himself with a faint blush, after which he said. Just don't cuddle with me while you sleep. Rias laughed a little, weakly flicked Umaki on the nose, and said as she passed by. Don't worry, I won't let you do anything more. Naruto blushed even more, but saying something like go to hell with your jokes, he left the room and went towards the toilet. The day passed as usual, everyone was just doing business. Cooking fell on the shoulders of the temporary owner of the house, although the rest of his roommates helped him, changing each other over time. The next day came, the day of training, the day the personal began for everyone. Kurama acted as a trainer, who was waist-high Uzumaki and drove everyone, sitting on the back of his Jinchuriki in the form of an additional load. Kiba trained in reaction speed, movement speed, and striking by practicing sword fighting with a Namikaze clone under the control of a Kurama clone. Kaneko trained in her punching power and ability to fight against the company alone. Akino in increasing magic damage. Rias sat at her books and studied military tactics. But it was much worse for the fair-haired fox. Kurama chased him personally and his clones. He was squeezed like lemon. Arriving, no hobbling home, Uzumaki literally fell on the bed, tiredly looking at the ceiling. Gremory, who had been sitting on the windowsill all this time, noticing Naruto's condition, sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at Ibis, only smiling faintly and taking off her glasses, asked, "Why did you crawl out of a coffin?" Naruto looked doomedly at the king, exhaled with all his strength, and said, "He's not a fox, but a demon. He squeezed all my strength out of me." Rias laughed quietly, helped Naruto get out of bed, and after leading him to the bathroom, she left. Naruto calmly washed himself until he felt something soft and elastic that rested on his back. Turning around, the fox noticed a piece of red hair and returning his head to its original position. He was about to ask something when the owner of scarlet hair interrupted him. "I'll help you wash up." Namikaze didn't even have the strength to blush, and he just sat obediently while Gremory rubbed his back with a sponge. A blush was visible on her face, but it was difficult to notice because in the bathroom there was hot steam everywhere from the hot water in the bathroom. When both finished washing, Naruto waited until Gremory came out and, having washed off the fatigue along with the shower gel, wiped himself dry and also left. A red-haired woman was already waiting for him in the room, lying on the bed under a blanket. He didn't have to wait long, and Namikaze, having prepared his clothes for tomorrow, lay down in bed and closed his eyes, but the last thing he felt was Rias pressing her bare chest and her whole body against him, laying her head on Umaki's naked torso, after which she fell asleep. Umaki woke up in an unusual position. He lay on his back, one hand lay on the waist next to the sleeping red-haired girl, and she, clinging to the guy, put her head on his chest, putting one hand next to his face, and Naruto's hand lay on top of this hand. Having examined everything, Namikaze blushed, but continued to lie quietly, involuntarily looking at the face of the sleeping Gremory. About 15 minutes passed and the owner of the nickname Strawberry woke up, realizing that the little fox had been looking at her face for about 5 minutes. She opened her eyes and looked straight into them, into those blue, captivating eyes like the sky. Naruto, realizing that he had been burned, looked away, to which Gremory only smiled, stood up and stretched, stood quite calmly in bed, showing the lying guy her naked figure, but Umaki looked at the wall, to which Rias only said with a smile, "Come on, I slept with you all night, and you've already seen enough since the morning." Naruto, blushing, quickly sat down on the edge of the bed and, poking the red-haired woman with his finger, said loudly, "I have the honor, so I didn't look at everything below the face, so don't be here." Gremory smiled triumphantly and opened the closet with the guy's things, but he only managed to make the sound but his t-shirt was already on, to which Uzumaki jumped to his feet and approached Gremory. "Don't bother carrying my t-shirts, I'm not your boyfriend, why would you want to wring my clothes away from me?" Rias mockingly snorted and pulled back his cheek with one hand, and folded the other under her chest and said, "That's right, you're not my boyfriend, but you're completely mine, little fox, so you and your things are mine too." Smiling happily, the red-haired girl was about to leave when the strong hand of the fair-haired one did not turn her towards him, which is why she slightly blushed. "Maybe so, then you will be mine. After your wedding is dissolved, I will take you and appropriate you for myself." Rias chuckled and began to pull Umaki's cheeks to the sides. "The owner has been found. Do the job first, and then talk." Naruto did not stand aside and in response, began to pull the girl's cheeks to the sides. They would continue to torment each other, while wincing from their stretched cheeks to the sides, until their idol was interrupted by the queen's voice. "Doves, stop cooing and go downstairs, breakfast is ready." To which both blushed and, throwing evil glances at each other, began to get dressed. Naruto pulled on a white t-shirt with a homemade, red whirlpool pattern from his past life, and underneath his favorite dark one's green knee-length shorts. Strawberry wore an Umaki t-shirt and jeans with a belt on the bottom. Today they had no training, because everyone needed a break from sudden stress. Having gone down to the first floor, the fair-haired one sat down on the sofa, and Rias sat on the chair, looking around everyone present. Gremory said, "Today we will take a break from sudden stress, so today is a day off, you can go about your business, and if there are new orders, I will call you." Everyone nodded, sat together for a while and began to disperse. Only Kaneko, Gremory, and Naruto remained in the house. They calmly sipped tea until the red-haired girl looked at Umaki and said, "There's a task here, can you handle it?" Naruto just shrugged his shoulders, got up from the sofa and, standing in the right place, dissolved into the pentagram. Gremory just sighed, and looking at the place where Umaki had just been, she said, "If only nothing happened." To which Kaneko only smiled faintly and looked at the same place. "He won't disappear." The red-haired girl only nodded at the Nakomida's words, starting a calm conversation with her. At this time, the little fox found himself near a small one-story house. Knocking on the door, he spoke. "Have you called a demon to your house?" In response to his knock, the door was opened by a small boy of about 11 years old, but Uzumaki was already about to ask something, when the gloomy boy brazenly interrupted him. "Are you a demon? Anyway, let's go." Walking into the house, the boy sat down opposite Namake's and began to speak. "I want to see my parents, can you arrange this?" Naruto looked around and noticed many photographs with the boy and adults he did not know, to which he asked a question. "For what?" "Your parents are alive." The boy clenched his fists and pointed his finger at the photograph. To which he said irritably, "What do you care? You are a demon. These are not my parents, they are adopted, after mine handed me over to the shelter. I want to see them." Umaki only smiled faintly and took out a photograph from his pocket, which was preserved in his memory, and he was able to create it exactly. With a chuckle, Naruto said, "If they left you, can you call them parents?" The boy jumped off the sofa, pointed his finger at the fair-haired man, and tears welled up in his eyes. "What do you just understand? You were born and lived in warmth when I was rotting in an orphanage from birth, until these strangers took me away, who did not care at all about my feelings." This reminds me of something, Uzumaki thought, remembering the situation with the architect's son, where they carried out a mission to protect against Zabuza. Naruto chuckled weakly, ruffled the boy's hair and put down a photo of his parents. "You know, technically my parents are not my parents. You are unlikely to understand this, but I understand you. My real parents died during my birth, they became heroes, and I became a punching bag. Until I was 16, I didn't even know who my parents were. And the fact that you were taken from the orphanage is already good news. Parents are considered to be those who raised you." After a short pause, the boy shed a few tears, and Umaki took back the photo with Kushina, Minato, and Naruto, put it in his pocket, and then spoke again. "So, do you want to meet them?" The boy shook his head from side to side as a sign of denial, and then smiled faintly and looked at the demon. "I hope you can see your parents on your own." But to this Namake's only smiled sadly. Unpleasant memories surfaced in his memory and his mood noticeably dropped, but he tried not to show it, saying, "Unfortunately, no forces will be able to hold our meeting, the only memories of them will be here, and here." With the last words, the little fox pointed at his heart and at the location of the photograph. The boy just nodded, and after talking a little, he wished that his adoptive parents would return quickly, to which Naruto fulfilled his request and disappeared into the red pentagram of Gremory, completely forgetting that there was someone besides him in his house. Returning home, Uzumaki took out a photo with his family, more precisely with the family of Naruto Uzumaki, not Umaki, just running his finger over the photo, but suddenly the voice of a red-haired girl sounded from the room. "Naruto? How did the challenge go?" The Uzumaki, trembling slightly, put the photo in his pocket, took off his shoes and walked inside, answering with a fake smile. "Everything went well, there was just a small misunderstanding, but everything was perfect." Smiling, Umaki sat down on the sofa and looked a little sadly at the family photo hanging on the wall. The girl sitting next to her noticed this and, looking at Naruto, asked a question that interested her. "Something happened? You look sad." Naruto twitched and turned his gaze to the girl who sat down next to him and, smiling falsely, said, "It's okay. By the way, where's Kaneko? She seemed to be with you." Rias only frowned and said, grabbing Umaki's cheek and pulling it slightly, She left on business and won't be back until tomorrow, but you're not okay. I'm a king, I have to take care of you. Tell me what happened. The little fox exhaled tiredly, stopped pretending and took out a photograph and handed it to the girl, who took it and looked at Umaki with an open question. These are not your parents, who are they? Why do you look so much like them and lie in their arms as a baby? Exhaling, Naruto began the conversation while sadly looking at the photo. These are my parents, but now they didn't even exist in this world. Suddenly he was interrupted by the voice of the Kyuubi sitting inside, like thunder in the subconscious. Are you sure you want to tell her? Uzumaki put the photo in his pocket and said. Anyway, it will be revealed sooner or later, and because I serve her, it will be difficult to hide it. It's better to tell it yourself. Gremory simply looked at Namikaze while he was talking to his furry schizophrenia. And as soon as Naruto finished speaking, he turned to the red-haired girl. Give me your hand, otherwise this is an extremely long story. Rias offered her hand to Uzumaki, to which he took it, closed his eyes, and exhaled. Everything around them began to get dark and the couple found themselves in a dark room with very high walls, the floor was completely dry, and there were no pipes. Looking around in fear, Gremory felt an ominous force, but Namikaze did not flinch, continuing to lead the girl by the hand and walking towards the source of power. Everything happened as at the first meeting between Naruto and Kurama, a sticky and oppressive darkness enveloped the classmates, the girl walking behind looked around in fear, tightly holding the hand of the guy walking in front. Suddenly a cage appeared in front of them, and behind it were two burning eyes. Rias trembled a little from such a thick and bloodthirsty aura, seeing a real monster in front of her, but Uzumaki only squeezed her hand tighter, thereby calming the red-haired girl. Kurama, that's enough, the guy said calmly looking at the clot of energy. To which he laughed and turned into a fox, with 9 mechanical, dragon-like tails and the same mechanical ears. A loud and piercing voice sounded everywhere, even in the heads of the heroes. Ho ho ho, are you really embarrassed by your old friend in front of a girl? Naruto looked at his old friend seriously, and Rias, blushing, only squeezed Umaki's hand harder. Better retell my whole story, otherwise it's better to hear it from you. Kyuubi just nodded and began to tell Naruto's whole life, before he was reborn as a demon. An hour passed, 2, 3, Gremory sat and looked first at the guy, then at the fox, thinking about all the words spoken. Kurama kept silent about some events, because Naruto himself would think about talking about it or not. These events were calling Naruto a demon, almost daily beatings. The second was training with Jiraiya, or rather the collection of material and his personal secrets. Gremory, having heard the whole story, looked thoughtfully at Naruto. She learned almost his main secret and now, looking at his sad look, said. There are some things I still don't understand, but after hearing your story. I'm sorry. Uzumaki just smiled and they returned to the real world. Only 10 minutes passed and Umaki said. In my subconscious, time flows slower. Strawberry just nodded, continuing to look at the little fox. Are you sure you're okay? Naruto nodded weakly and got up from the sofa and said something like I'll go lie down or sleep, and went upstairs. Entering the room, Namikaze took off all his clothes, remaining only in his underwear, after which he lay down on the bed and pulled the blanket up to his waist, clasping his hands behind his head, looking at the ceiling. The silence was interrupted by the creaking of the door opening and the appearance of Gremory, who, looking sadly at Umaki, undressed as usual, crawling under the blanket to the guy, she pressed herself against him, laying her head on his shoulder. Looking at the blushing fair-haired one, she smiled and asked. How should I contact you now? Uzumaki, Namikaze? Smiling faintly, the little fox grabbed Rias's waist with one hand, causing her to blush. Just consider that nothing happened and nothing has changed, you will just know a little more about me. Smiling, Naruto closed his eyes, before looking at the girl for several minutes, and she just laid her head on the fox's chest, covered with a faint blush from Umaki's hand lying on her waist, and fell asleep, looking at the wall. Days passed after day, training, after another day, everyone returned tired from a grueling training, which became more difficult every day, but this also bore fruit. The entire Gremory team, as always, unable to even talk, had dinner and, after washing, went to their rooms and went to bed. This also affected the main character, Umaki Naruto. Lying down on the bed with his hair still wet, looking at the ceiling, he thought how a hole hadn't been burned there yet, from his daily and intent glances in one place. The red-haired girl returned late, because she had been reading books on tactics until the night, studying and doing everything to increase their chances of winning. Umaki was about to close his eyes when he remembered a recent conversation with the red-haired girl. Flashback. Naruto, I'm not sure that even with training we will defeat the Phoenix. Gremory sadly lowered her head and looked at the floor. She was ashamed of her thoughts, because the guys tried and gave their best in training, and she doubts their victory. Uzumaki smiled and put his hand on the coffee table. Don't worry, even if we fail and lose, I will save you by any means, don't worry. The little fox smiled and said goodbye to the king, went to bed, and she, in turn, adjusted her glasses and continued reading the book. End flashback. He was interrupted from his thoughts by the creaking of the door opening. Rias's red hair appeared in the opening, to which Naruto, without turning around, asked, "Have you finished?" Today was finally the last training session, you can rest, the fair-haired man said blissfully, inhaling the air and spreading his arms to the sides, closing his eyes. Everything was fine until the girl sat on him, resting her hands on the guy's strong torso. The light was extinguished, but one could notice that Gremory's complexion was comparable to her hair. Umaki naturally blushed and the smile disappeared from his face, replaced by misunderstanding of what was happening and embarrassment. What are you doing?" Namikaze asked, looking at the red-haired girl sitting on top. Please do this way the engagement agreement will be broken and we won't have to fight." The girl's hand had already crawled down, and the second began to unfasten her bra, when Namikaze jumped out from under the girl and stopped her, looking straight into her eyes. "No need." Tears flowed from Gremory's eyes, and her hands themselves trembled treacherously, but the only thing she could say now was, "Why? You yourself said that you would free me from this marriage by any means." Instead of saying anything, the little fox simply hugged the girl, feeling drops of tears on his shoulder. After several minutes of silence, Naruto said quietly, "I don't know how you feel. But I am your servant, no. I am part of your family. I will keep my word and free you without harming you and your future in any way, let's say, help from the shadows." "Don't worry, I won't let him lay a finger on you," Umaki said, hearing Rias calm down. They sat there in silence for a long time, until Naruto heard the quiet snoring of the red-haired princess, leaning his back against the wall. Uzumaki, not wanting to wake up the sleeping girl, fell asleep in an extremely uncomfortable sitting position. The day started calmly, if you don't notice the absence of the girl snoring next to her, who yesterday fell asleep with her head on the guy's shoulder. Only now, having woken up in the morning, Princess Gremory was not there, and Umaki was sleeping not in a sitting position, but in a lying position, carefully covered with a blanket. Was this a dream? A thought involuntarily flashed through Naruto's head, but the answer to this question was not long in coming, sounding in his head. "No, it wasn't a dream, it's just that your red-haired princess ran away early in the morning out of embarrassment over what happened." Only smiling good-naturedly, Umaki took the clothes and asked the roommate with whom he shared his subconscious. "Has the great Rug no Yoku given us a wonderful chance to see him awake?" "Okay, we'll deal with this later." Namikaze interrupted the connection just before the fox realized who he was called and what he was called. Having laughed a little, the Jinchuriki went to brush his teeth and just get himself in order. 10 minutes passed and Uzumaki was already preparing himself a sandwich for a snack. Everyone suspiciously disappeared somewhere, but it was only better for him, because silence would reign in the house from the very morning, without being distracted by all sorts of little things. Umaki already wanted to have a quiet snack and took the sandwich between his teeth. "I put the electronic kettle on to boil so I could drink some tea." But the plans were not destined to come true, and Kaneko, who appeared out of nowhere, proved this. Grabbing Naruto, who did not understand anything, by the hand, Tojo disappeared the same way she appeared, in the pentagram. Finding himself in the already familiar room of occult research, Namikaze looked around those present with a silent but clearly visible question, but only after a few minutes he realized that in addition to his friends, there were two more people standing there. The first was a woman about 20 years old, with red eyes and silver hair and pigtails. She was dressed in blue and white maid clothes. Standing next to him was a man, an exact copy of Rias, with red hair and dressed in a strange suit, which turned out to be the attire of a demon lord, who looked about 20 years old. Looking at Rias with a question and undisguised indignation, she only smiled and stood up and spoke. "Good morning to you too. Well, this is my older brother, Sasuke Lucifer, or the current demon lord." Pointing at the red-haired one, Rias moved to the silver-haired girl standing next to her. "And this, Graphia Lucifuge, the rook and part-time wife of my brother." Nodding in greeting, the wife and husband did not wait long. The eloquent look of the king of the underworld made him throw away the sandwich, to which he muttered something unintelligible and glared angrily at the red-haired woman, but still threw the sandwich away. Standing back up, Umaki bowed and introduced himself. "My name is Naruto Umaki. I am the new piece of Rias, or more precisely Iblis, a mixture of 8 pawns and a bishop." Satan was a little surprised by this behavior, but after waiting for the guy to finish, he began his story. "You all know that Rias is supposed to marry Riser?" Having received affirmative nods, he continued. "Well, you have a chance if you play the rating game with him and win Rias' freedom." Looking at his younger sister, Sasuke noticed her long glance at the owner of millet yellow hair and blue eyes. Noticing something for himself, he began to explain something. The atmosphere was pleasant until a yellow pentagram appeared on the ground next to the sofa. Naruto looked at the pentagram with incomprehension, and suddenly a man appeared from it, looking extremely similar to a rooster. "Fried chicken" is what Uzumaki and Fox dubbed it. Suddenly, this guy approached Rias and put his hand on the girl's shoulder, but she quickly threw it off. The atmosphere went from cheerful to dissatisfied and tense. Only the cockerel kept a nasty smile on his face. "Well, dear, soon you won't resist so much." Smiling disgustingly, Razor looked around at everyone present and, holding his gaze at Namikaze, asked a question that was of no interest to anyone. "So this is that useless mutant?" Crossing his arms, Phoenix looked at the little fox with mockery and contempt, to which he looked at him angrily and calmly replied. "I didn't think that my fame not only runs ahead of me, but has already reached the roasted rooster." The phoenix, seriously angry, released its fiery wings and aura, to which Naruto only yawned, angering him even more. Is Rias really so irresponsible that she can't even teach a servant how to properly handle pure-blooded demons, which are higher in status than them? To which Naruto just shrugged his shoulders and said, quite calmly, still not getting up from his seat. "I taught you, but no one can teach you how to communicate with stupid people." Riser almost attacked the sly fox, but noticeably calmed down, remembering that besides him and the younger Gremory figures, there was also Sasuke and his wife. Realizing that now he could teach him a lesson, he called on his figures, which consisted only of women. "I suppose you're so sharp-tongued only because you can't even get one normal woman, let alone a harem." Spreading his arms to the sides, the feathered one seemed to show his wealth, to which Umaki only sked and rolled his eyes, answering in the same calm and chilling tone. "Well, at least I don't have a problem with this, to start a whole harem." For self-affirmation. Phoenix flared up again with anger filling him, sending his weakest pawn to attack. "Yes, even my weakest pawn is stronger than you." The girl with the stick attacked Namikaze with a sharp jerk, to which he quickly jumped back and made the stick stop at his throat, to which Riser laughed. "Which is what needed to be proven. The vaunted mutant lost to Mira, the weakest of my pieces." Naruto chuckled and narrowed his head and looked at Mira's neck. "Look carefully, the chicken is undercooked." There was a small cut on the neck of the attacking girl, from which blood immediately appeared. "If I had attacked a little harder, the member of your sub-harem would have died immediately." Phoenix was about to answer something, but Lucifer's queen interrupted them. "Enough, if you don't stop, I will be forced to use force." Both calmed down, simply continuing to glare at each other while Sasuke and Grafia explained something about the raiding battle. The red-haired girl was given 3 days before the battle for freedom. Immediately after this, everyone dispersed, except for the Occult Research Club, who continued to sit in the room and talk. "And why did you put on such a performance?" Pulling back the little fox's cheek, Rias shook her finger at him, to which Naruto, trying to break free from the grip, said, "Will Mofet stop pulling my cheek? Maybe stop pulling my cheek." Naruto, holding his retractable cheek, hoped that Gremory would hear his pleas, but she only smiled and replied, "No, next time you will think before you act." Umaki just hung his head, having already abandoned his attempts to free his vindictive cheek. "Prfti. Forgive." Everyone laughed a little at this scene, but this could not go on for long and the president took pity and let Uzumaki go, to which he thanked her and sat down. The rest of the time the evil figures talked about the plan, and just chatted. The next day, Rias's team gathered in their club and, after waiting for the last person, they stood in the place of the large pentagram, which, having appeared, immediately teleported our heroes to the climb up the mountain, where, having given all the luggage to Naruto and Kaneko, they began to climb. Due to his daily training, Umaki was easy and easily stood up faster than the others. As soon as Rias stood up, Namikaze asked, "And this?" To which she clasped her hands behind her back and said, "This is our training camp, so settle down." Having entered the building, everyone settled into the free rooms. Naruto got a room with a double bed, while the others got rooms with a single bed. Everything would have been fine, but a red-haired person moved in with him, under the pretext, "I can sleep more peacefully with you." The training began. Uzumaki trained with the demon fox from early morning until late at night, training his ninjutsu and control of the holy mechanism, without the fox's chakra. He continued to train the rest of the days, until the moment came to return. Everyone went home and gathered at the school at the right time, namely at the old building, where Sasuke, Grafia and Rias appeared. The fight began. Kaneko and Kiba ran forward, while Naruto and Akino remained to protect the king. Some time passed and the first phoenix figure dropped out, and then the second. By this time, Gremory had made a decision to send Uzumaki to fight. A little time passed and the clones of the little fox were already helping their own, comparing scores. At this time, Umaki ran forward. Kaneko, 2 pawns and 1 rook were seen fighting ahead. Nakoma was already battered by this time and Uzumaki immediately created 4 clones and sent them to fight. They in turn distracted the girls and Naruto quickly pulled Kaneko away, giving her a break. "Rest, then I'll go on my own." Activating the sacred mechanism, Naruto took a piece of Kurama's chakra, realizing that he could not hesitate with them. By that time, the clone that was with Kiba had dissipated and passed on all the fatigue. The blonde had a hard time until Kaneko took over the rook. They quickly figured it out and Umaki stunned the twins with a blow from his tail. While Kaneko knocked out the rook, running out of the gym, it immediately exploded, and a smiling Akino was hovering very close by. "Could you at least wait until we leave?" Umaki was indignant, looking at the masochist. To which she just shrugged her shoulders with a smile, and Naruto, in turn, shuddered from this smile. Suddenly, an explosion sounded nearby and the carrier of the 9 tails immediately jumped back, but then the projectile hit Kaneko directly and she dropped out. "Rook Rias Gremory leaves the game," a loud voice sounded, which the main character did not like much, but he was stopped by Akino. "Better go and help Kiba, he has problems, I'll figure it out myself." Uzumaki nodded, but still played it safe and quietly sent the clone underground, while he himself ran to help Yuta. As Namikaze ran, that loud voice sounded again. 3 more Riser Phoenix pawns are eliminated. Smirking, Umaki only sped up, realizing to himself that Yuta was probably not sitting idle. Stopping at one of the walls to look back, he was suddenly pulled into a dark room. Naruto was about to attack when Kiba's voice sounded. "Shh." The fair-haired man immediately calmed down and, glancing sideways at him, asked the obvious question. "Were you the one who knocked out the pawns?" To which Kiba simply nodded and replied, Yes, in fact, this just proves how cruel Riser is. He sacrificed pawns to find out how dangerous I am. The guy sitting next to them began to think until a loud, female voice appeared nearby. Come out. I am Riser-sama's horse, Carlamine. Stop whispering there and come out for a fair fight. To which Kiba immediately stood up and took out his sword and walked out in front of the girl. I will fight you, since you challenged me, because I am the mistress's horse. They didn't talk for long and crossed swords between them and a fight began, to which Uzumaki only scratched his turnip and asked silently, what should I do, looking at the battle, but the voice of his best friend immediately brought him to his senses. There are enemies nearby, stop stupid and activate the mechanism, it's a bishop and a rook, so here you only have to fight with 2. Due to the fact that you have already used several clones, do not waste the remaining chakra, since this space is not a real school, so to speak, then there is less concentration of mana here, so do not scatter it from side to side. When Umaki only snapped with displeasure, he activated the holy mechanism and his multivalve appearance began to transform, to which his opponents were quite surprised, but did not attach much importance. He did not have to wait long and the bored voice of a girl standing behind sounded. Although it looks impressive, you are weak, and I'm not going to fight. Isabel, be his opponent. To which Uzumaki immediately began to be indignant. What is this for you, a game? Aren't you too arrogant? To which the girl with short hair immediately responded. She's not just a figure, she's Reiner-sama's younger sister, Revel Phoenix. And since she said that she would not fight, then so be it. We didn't have to wait long and Umaki, not continuing this meaningless conversation, rushed into battle, creating 2 clones next to him. Naruto created 2 small Rasengan, and then, passing one to the clone, sent it forward as a decoy. The girl fell for it and grabbed the second clone. She was chained to the ground from under the ground, after which Umaki, sending a Rasengan straight to the enemy's stomach, knocked up the girl, and after that the clones immediately scattered. Riser-sama's first bishop dropped out of the game. A voice sounded throughout the area, to which Naruto just smiled. But his happiness was not destined to last long as 4 more phoenix pawn pieces appeared nearby. Look at the roof, a very interesting battle will soon take place there, said one of the recently arrived. At which Uzumaki raised his head and saw Rias and Reiner standing opposite each other. Thoughts immediately appeared in my head. Disgusting, we are at a disadvantage, and Rias is now open, and we will probably be delayed by his pieces. But clenching his fists harder, Umaki resolutely raised his stubborn gaze upward and asked his old friend about one thing. Kurama, can I take your chakra? The Jinchuriki asked, not wanting to lose so easily, to which Kurama responded with a grumble of displeasure. You can, but are you sure that you will remain intact? I'm not sure. Now you have 3 more active clones that, when dissipated, will give their fatigue to you, and then the use of my chakra. You will probably get hurt. This will only work if you no longer use your chakra, but Umaki's answer interrupted the red-haired friend's thoughts. This is impossible, one way or another I will have to use it. To which the fox only responded with a laugh. I see you're serious, okay, I'll give you chakras, but don't die, otherwise it will be boring without you. Taking chakra from Kurama, Naruto became covered with a red and swirling aura that heated the air around him. The blonde pupil became vertical and sharp, the stripes became thicker and the fangs even sharper, and the nails on his fingers became claws, and Umaki said with a sigh, hitting his fist on his palm. Attack. Twin girls with ears immediately attacked from different sides, and wanting to deprive the fair-haired man of the opportunity to escape, they began to hit him right on the legs, but Naruto, with the help of Kurama, became many times faster than himself, without his chakra. Jumping up, the attacker kicked straight into the chest, thereby throwing them back and temporarily knocking out their breathing. Outwardly, it looked like a split in the air, but upon landing, Uzumaki looked at Yuta and spoke loudly. Yuta, use your mechanism. To which Kiba just threw I have a name and walked forward, and was about to use his sword creator, when he felt that an unknown energy was pouring into him through his back, similar to mana, but many times stronger. But there was one problem, it was right there, disappeared without stopping, but Naruto, supporting the flow of chakra, leaning his hand against the back of the horse, said, "Don't hesitate, come quickly." At the same time, Kurama was drawing conclusions in Uzumaki's head. Apparently they can feel chakra only when you conduct it into their bodies, through yourself, but because of the laws of this world, it simply does not linger there, immediately disappearing. I feel how it acts and interferes with his mana, but here it erodes, not having time to mix completely to become a single whole, but only strengthens its own mana for the duration of its existence. To which Umaki just said, "She eats twice as much as she should, it's too expensive, even so I don't know how much it enhances." But this question was answered by the actions of Kiba, who, using his holy mechanism, covered the entire clearing with swords that came out of the ground and stretched out everyone on it, but only the sister of the roasted cockerel managed to fly up. Amazing. What kind of feeling was that, and what kind of power was that? Yuto asked, but Uzumaki did not hear him, listening to the announcement. Queen Rias, Gremory eliminates from the game. Naruto wanted to do something, when the place where he was standing exploded, but Umaki's heightened senses helped him dodge this attack. Naruto was about to turn to Kiba to warn about sudden attacks, when another explosion occurred and Kiba found himself right in the middle. Rias Gremory's horse eliminates from the game. A woman appeared in the air who was fighting with Akino and Kaneko. Naruto was about to attack her, but she simply flew away and Uzumaki, not giving a about her, hurried to the place of the battle between Rias and Riser. Running through the corridors he saw Riser's sister, and she waited until Naruto stopped, spoke. "Do you still want to fight? You are at a disadvantage, we have phoenix tears, you will lose." To which Umaki only clenched his hand into a fist and said. "I won't give up even if I remain at a disadvantage. Do you think I don't care about your advantages? I am the servant of Rias Gremory and I will fight to the end until I have the strength of arms and legs and the full ability to move." The girl just snorted and Naruto, not wanting to waste any more time, ran further. Rising to the roof, he saw an exhausted Rias and a completely intact Riser. "Rias, I have come to help." To which the phoenix gave him a look and spoke. "See? Even your remaining servants are exhausted. I've already put you in checkmate, give up, I won't repeat it 3 times. To which Rias once again fired magic and said. "Shut up, Riser. King is still intact, which means we can continue the fight." To which Phoenix covered his face with his hand and only muttered. "How stubborn you are." A girl with long hair standing behind him began to create something and lightning struck the place where Umaki was supposed to be, but Naruto used a replacement for a clone, and then created another one. "Idiot, your chakra is not enough, if you want to die beautifully, I will give you more chakra, but on the condition that you, a stupid partridge, will not die." The fox growled, to which the fair-haired man nodded in agreement and a surge of strength entered his body, as if a second source of endurance had opened, but realizing that he could not hesitate, Naruto appeared right behind the enemy's back and used a Rasengan, hitting the opponents in the back. The girl did not have time to react and was seriously wounded, while the phoenix managed to jump away, but took all the damage upon itself and, spoke. "Annoying bug, don't you understand, these toothpicks won't kill me." The torn flesh on his side began to repair and mend itself, while the arrogant smile on Riser's face grew. "You won't do anything to me, maybe you'll just give up?" But Naruto only growled, while at the same time a second tail formed. Naruto, in turn, got down on all fours and began to attack Phoenix hand to hand, because after using the Rasengan and 2 clones, he had no mana left, and his consciousness was held only by willpower and Kurama's chakra. Dealing blow after blow to the phoenix, he tried to dodge, but only received more wounds. He got tired of it and, allowing himself to be wounded, Razor kicked Umaki in the stomach, and he jumped back and took out a small bottle from under his jacket, drank it, after which his strength returned recovered. "Now let's talk differently, little rat." The higher demon shouted and launched an open attack on Uzumaki. Unlike Riser, Naruto did not regain his strength, but only became more tired. He missed blow after blow, in response to inflicting wounds that healed instantly. The last blow was a good knee strike to the stomach, which completely knocked Naruto out of balance. The guy's body was subjected to colossal loads from the Kyuubi's chakra, because his chakra was almost zero, while at the same time the beating from the full-strength phoenix helped. Flying back, Naruto coughed up blood and struggled to his feet, looking just as stubbornly at the phoenix. But he was distracted by his friend's concerned voice. "Naruto, that's enough." But Uzumaki did not want to end on such an unfortunate moment, and clenching his fists until it hurt, he quietly answered. "No, I won't give up, I don't want to, why am I so weak? I can't even hold your two tails. I can't give up so easily." But Kurama only chuckled sympathetically and said, "Partly, this is your and my fault, but now you better stop, because if you continue, then even my chakra will not be able to maintain your condition and you will simply die from chakra exhaustion and no one else will be able to do anything." But to this Uzumaki only remained silent. The red cover began to subside, and the overloaded body made itself known and about the injuries. Several broken ribs, internal bleeding, bruises, wounds, and a large number bruises. Sitting on the floor, Umaki wanted to catch his breath, looking angrily at Razor, to which he only smiled evilly, looking down at his enemy. Rias, standing next to her, clenched her fists until it hurt and only lowered her head, with tears appearing, spoke quietly. "Sorry. I'm sorry I got you involved in this, I hope you forgive me." Smiling sadly and glancing briefly at the Uzumaki sitting next to him, who was not in the best condition. Gremory gathered her feelings and, raising her head high, said, continuing to clench her fists painfully. "I give up, but don't hurt them anymore." Naruto, sitting next to him, wanted to object, but he was stopped by Kurama's deep voice. "Stop, you can't even touch him now." Rias acted like the only sane person out of the two of you, even though she has enough brains to understand that you have already lost. Gritting his teeth, Naruto looked with resentment at Rias leaving, towards the phoenix. With resentment not because he got it, but because he is so weak that he could not defeat one feathered and pompous chicken, with his strength in the past. The last thing he saw before he passed out was the sad and almost destroyed Gremory and the happy Riser, who was holding Rias possessively by the waist, looking with contempt at the half-dead Naruto. Only one thought was spinning in my head. I won't just leave it like that, but I'm too weak. After losing consciousness, Naruto entered his subconscious and seeing Kurama in front of him, the fox spoke. "You really are a weakling, since you couldn't even defeat him, but this is no longer your problem. Now, in the outside world, everyone is preparing for the engagement, so you can't do anything." Looking angrily at the fox, Uzumaki only said, "Aren't you too kind? I know you're kidding me. Help me become stronger. I want to teach him a lesson." To which Kurama just laughed. "Forgot? I feel people's intentions and feelings, and I can say for sure that you want to save the princess, not because of a desire for revenge." To which Uzumaki was embarrassed, but not wanting to admit it, he spoke. "Give me strength. I don't want to be such weak trash." The fox answered with a chuckle. "Okay, you'll save your strawberry, but first, I'll change the time here." After the snap of the fox's fingers, Umaki looked around, did not notice any changes, and looked at Kurama with a question, to which he explained. "Now, a month will pass here, like in the real world, only 3 days, just in time for the engagement." Nodding confidently, the fair-haired man began to discuss the plan with the fox. "Look. Now you will train control over the Kyuubi's chakra, and also try to awaken the second holy mechanism and improve the first." Nodding, Naruto sat in the lotus position and began to meditate. Skip. A week has passed since the beginning of meditation. From that moment Uzumaki could calmly hold 4 tails, now he has formed 5½ with his eyes closed. His stripes have become thicker since the beginning of training, and his pupils are slightly narrower, at the same time his fangs a little longer. These were the consequences of Kurama's chakra in this world. As soon as the week ended, Naruto deactivated Kurama's shroud and looked around, speaking. "My body is so light. How good it is, my body has become stronger and so has my body." Kurama, who had been sleeping all this time, chuckled and answered. What did you expect? This is the chakra of the great Kyubi no Yoko. Smiling, Umaki created half a day of training for himself, talking with his best friend, and then, sitting on the dry floor, he tried to concentrate on the power that the absorbed holy mechanism was releasing from himself. This concentration lasted 2 days until Naruto was unable to find the right direction, and after calling on this power, gold-colored plate gloves with black claws formed on his hands. In appearance, they were very similar to the paws of a fox, which is why Naruto answered with a grin. "Ha, even here you won't leave me." The fox looked questioningly at Uzumaki, to which he only showed his gloves, and after talking, Naruto wanted to know what the ability of these gloves was. Kurama naturally suggested. "Since your holy mechanism is connected to me, then imagine a tailed bomb?" It sounded more like a question, but nodding, Naruto put his hands forward and a pentagram began to form in front of them, which was a bright red color, with an orange tint. There were a bunch of unknown symbols on it, and they changed all the time. After a few minutes of being in one position, the air around the pentagram began to gather at one point, creating a small ball that after a couple of seconds was half the size of a palm. It did not grow anymore, and Uzumaki threw it into the farthest corner, causing an explosion similar to a Rasen shuriken /span. As soon as Naruto trained, the time came return to the real world. Kurama turned out to be the lab rat, kindly agreeing, although there were only 3 days left for training. After a little persuasion, the fox came to the rescue. The rest of the week, Naruto trained in using this power. And in the last week, Umaki increased the rate of absorption of forces, without harming the creature. It was more difficult than just killing him and taking all the power. It felt like it was possible to make 4 more of these balls, no more. Waking up from a long sleep, Naruto looked at Rias sitting next to him and looked at her questioningly and asked, "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at the ceremony party?" Rias wanted to say something, but fell into a precipitate, from the awareness of the recently awakened demon, from a 3-day coma, but only with a sigh, she handed Naruto a piece of paper with a pentagram. "Now I understand why Sasuke is so interested in you. We already know that you want to save Rias. Here you go, don't screw it up, we believe in you." Smiling one last time, Rias disappeared into the pentagram, and Uzumaki, taking the piece of paper, quickly threw on a mesh t-shirt with short sleeves, black pants, and the same jacket with orange inserts. Tearing the piece of paper, Uzumaki found himself in front of the door to the hall. Exhaling, the blonde man walked up to the door and opened it with a roar, forcing everyone present to pay attention. Rias's pawns were delighted, because they literally saw his determination and reluctance to give up so easily, just like Rias herself, while Riser only irritably raised his eyebrows to the bridge of his nose, looking at the blonde with contempt. Sasuke only glanced at the scene of the incident and was clearly in high spirits. Continued talking. The guards rushed to the culprit of the commotion, and the rest of the guests just looked at everything that was happening with incomprehension. The guards were about to grab the little fox, when they were stopped by the rest of Rias's pawns. Only nodding, Uzumaki, pressing with his and the fox's aura, began to approach Rias and the razors. Stopping right in front of him, Naruto began to speak, looking straight at the phoenix with his sharp pupils. "I challenge you to a duel." Having said it abruptly, Naruto did not move, looking at the grinning phoenix. "Why should I agree? I am a high demon, and you are just a half-blood. And besides, you came to my holiday and spoil the whole atmosphere just with your presence." "Yes, dear?" Both looked at Rias, to which she only lowered her gaze to the floor and said, "Naruto, please go away. You haven't recovered yet, you won't be able to stand against him." But Uzumaki simply did not listen to Gremory and looked at Riser and spoke. "I'm putting my life on the line. If I lose, my life is in your hands, do what you want. And if I win, then I will take Rias and you will never touch her again." Phoenix just laughed quietly, looked at the slightly embarrassed Rias, and then at Umaki, and then answered, "Okay, let's see how long you can hold out. Get ready to become my slave, little one." While the phoenix was saying this, Strawberry turned her attention to the watching Sasuke and asked, "What does this mean, brother?" To which he only approached his sister and responded with a smile. "This is my idea. When he first moved to your school, I immediately noticed his unusual strength, and since such a chance presented itself, why not check it out? And you will be glad if he carries you away in his arms." Winking at his flushed sister, Sasuke began to create something, and then spoke. "Well, spice up this ceremony with your duel. I announce the start of the battle." After this, Phoenix and Little Fox found themselves on the battlefield. Riser, who still underestimated Naruto, said with an evil smile, "I will take your victory, I will take Rias and her innocence right before your eyes. And after that I will take your strange artifact, along with your life." Naruto, standing calmly opposite, was talking in the subconscious with Kurama, who remained unnoticed in the audience. "Don't answer, he's provoking you. Acting on a hot head, you will do something stupid." Nodding, Umaki began to become covered with Kurama's chakra. First one tail appeared, then the already sharp fangs lengthened, the pupils became fox-like, and the stripes on his cheeks were even stronger. An aura of pressure and bloodthirstiness hovered around him, which did not come from Naruto, and from the chakra is a fox. Remembering this, Riser only prepared for battle, reminding Uzumaki of his mistake. "Oh, I remember this aura. I also remember your loss." Naruto began to attack him hand to hand without using techniques, but he quickly got tired of it, due to the restoration of the phoenix, and, as a trick, he made 2 clones with a Rasengan, ordered them to attack. At the same time, Umaki, using the artifact, put out 2 hands in fox armor, and began to cast a pentagram with a tailed bomb. At the same time on the balcony, Kurama, sitting calmly on the side, was noticed by Kaneko, but the unsuspecting fox sat quietly watching the fight. At the same time, Nakoma quietly approached Kurama, quickly grabbed him from the back and, with her rook strength, squeezed the little fox in an iron embrace, to which Kurama naturally screamed, "Put it down. I am the great Kyubi no Yoko. Let go." The last word was said with his last breath, as he was mercilessly squeezed, because of which the air ran out, and Kaneko, who realized this, naturally loosened her grip. Realizing that it was better not to twitch, the fox simply hung in Tojo's arms like an ordinary cat, and the owner of white hair herself went to the others. At the same time, Rias, standing and watching the fight, noticed strange gloves and asked a logical question. What is this? I don't remember him having such strength. What is this? I don't remember him having such strength." To which Kurama, hanging in the arms of Tojo, who had approached unnoticed, replied, "While you were preparing for the wedding, he trained sparingly, taking a break only for half a day." Gremory, who did not expect this, turned around a little and first looked questioningly at Kaneko, and later seeing Kurama in her hands, she only sighed, realizing what had happened. Only she and her pieces understood what was happening here, but the rest of the guests and Sasuke and Grafia fell into a sediment from such a pet in the hands of the rook. Seeing a lot of questions in brother's eyes, Gremory poked finger at the fighting Uzumaki, and said, "This is his friend, you can say, pet, sitting inside." But the 9 tails did not want to put up with such a comparison and, breaking free from Kaneko's grip, jumped on Rias. "Who is this pet here? You pathetic creatures cannot understand who I am. I am the great Kyubi, but Yoko, the 9-tailed demon fox. And this empty-headed one is just my Jinchuriki." Sasuke watched the fox with interest and then asked a logical question. "Demon fox? I'm like the king of, I don't really remember you, just like the Jinchuriki. Are you from Nikomata folklore? But then how are you related to the reincarnated demon?" Kurama wanted to run away from so many questions, but he was stopped by Rias, who literally grabbed him by the scruff of the neck, wanting to also know the answer. Kurama telepathically asked Naruto to hurry up so as not to explain to these red-haired people what he is. Uzumaki only nodded to his friend's requests and put more strength into this battle/span. While the clones were distracting Reiner, the tailed bomb had already formed and Umaki quietly replaced himself with a clone and hid underground. At the same time, the shadow clone directly ran towards Phoenix, to which he grinned. "New tricks won't help the old pony. This another toy can't hurt me?" demonstratively spreading his arms. He wanted to show his superiority by showing how he would take this blow. Only he did not take into account the force of this blow and, having accepted the tailed bomb with his stomach, he felt enormous pain. Tissues were torn, bones were broken, blood boiled and evaporated. A huge explosion occurred that diverted all attention to himself, and taking advantage of the moment, the fox pretended to fall asleep, because it was useless to run away, to which Gremory just shrugged, carefully taking Kurama in her arms so as not to wake up him. During a huge explosion, Rias flew into the other end of the arena, falling at the very edge. His condition was terrible, a huge and through hole in his stomach, but it began to slowly heal, and Rias looked exhausted and angrily at the little fox that appeared from under the ground. "How do you like my gift?" To which Phoenix said loudly, clenching his teeth angrily. "Bastard! You couldn't master that kind of power in 3 days. Unless you sold your limb to a holy mechanism. But you're an idiot for doing this." To which Uzumaki only laughed and began to approach the recovering Rias. "-3 days? Sold a limb? Ha ha ha. I trained for a whole month. To teach you a lesson and lower your self-esteem. And you still say that I took the easy way? Huh. I'll show you what I learned in a month." Grabbing the phoenix by the neck, Naruto lifted it up, taking its energy for himself without killing it. A little time passed, Rias's wound stopped healing and opened again, and his skin turned pale and bruises appeared under his eyes. Realizing that this was enough, Uzumaki left him, more or less carefully laying him on the ground. Deactivating his plate gloves and Kyubi chakra, Naruto returned back to balcony, under the surprised glances of guests. But he was interrupted by Suzuki's voice. "Month? But this is not more important. What is he?" Pointing his finger at the pretending Kurama, Uzumaki wanted to leave in the same way, but began to explain. "He is an ancient descendant of Kitsune, or Nakomata. He calls himself the nine-tailed demon fox. He was imprisoned in a sacred mechanism, and due to some mistake, I could communicate with him since childhood. Also, that aura and gloves are his strength. And thanks to our connection, I can summon a smaller version of him, before being imprisoned in the sacred mechanism. We're friends, so I won't offend him." Nodding uncertainly, Suzuki went into his own thoughts, pondering what was said. Rias, standing aside all this time, smiling happily, because she heard his conversation with the phoenix like the others, and understood that they strange 3 days, he trained the stubbornness of his hands to save her from the wedding. Umaki noticed that Kurama actually fell asleep in Gremory's arms, only smiled kindly. Allah 32 teeth are not the limit, and approached to Rias, bowed slightly and said, "Madam, I freed you from imprisonment, doesn't your servant deserve praise?" To which the blushing Gremory, waiting for Uzumaki to straighten up, slightly approached him and kissed him on the cheek, causing both herself and Umaki to blush, quickly turning away, the red-haired one without a sign left with the sleeping fox in her arms. Well, Rias's pawns, who noticed this, only smiled at what was happening. Kiba was glad that Gremory had found someone. Well, Akino and Kaneko were happy for the same reason as Kiba, but they also had an unpleasant feeling seeing their president with Uzumaki. After everyone had calmed down, it was time to return home, to which Naruto wanted to go with everyone, but Grafia stopped him, giving him another piece of paper with a pentagram. "Forgot the condition? You should take Rias out of here and not go alone." To which Naruto, looking at Gremory, only nodded, and with a gesture calling her to him, tore the piece of paper, but instead of a teleportation circle, a griffin appeared. "Should we fly?" And hearing yes in response, Umaki had no choice but to fly. Having seated Rias a little forward, and sat back, they took off, heading home. After some time in the flight, Rias, slightly blushing, looking at the sleeping fox, asked a question, attracting Naruto's attention. "You know, I am very grateful to you for saving me. But now I have a question, is the first kiss really that important?" Not understanding the essence of the question, Uzumaki only looked questioningly at Rias, to which she pulled Naruto towards her with her hand and kissed him. When the air ran out, both red as crayfish pulled away, but smiles were still on their faces, due to a pleasant warming feeling in their souls. On this day, Rias slept with Naruto, as in is the first day of life as a demon. Then there was a lemon scene, which YouTube condemns, and that's the end of it, guys.